What is up, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, and this is where I give commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. Before I get started, I would like to send a special shout out to the newest subscribers. One of the new subscribers, Triple X Edits. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you guys for watching my review, my first ever reaction to SmackDown. That's the first time I had ever done that. Thank you guys so much for watching that. I really appreciate it. I can't believe Jay has gone. But thank you guys for that because I got over 200 views and I really appreciate that. Today, we celebrate two special birthdays in one. Johnny Wrestling, aka Johnny Takeover, Johnny Gargano, and New Day member Kofi Kingston. Now, because it's a 2-for-1 special, I'm going to give you my top 5 favorites from both guys. Excuse me. Now, we're going to start this in alphabetical order. So we will start with Johnny Wrestling, Johnny Takeover, aka Johnny Gargano. We start at number 5 with Johnny Gargano versus Grayson Waller at NXT Stand and Deliver earlier this year. This was a pretty good one. It was an almost no-holds-barred like match, and Johnny was the hand-picked guy from Shawn Michaels. Keep in mind, after NXT War Games 2021, I believe, or 2. Nah, that was 2. NXT probably 2022, but sometime after that, Johnny was attacked by Grayson Waller. And for a while now, Johnny never got his payback. But that would all change this night. As being named the mystery opponent from Shawn Michaels, Johnny Gargano and Waller would have a no-holds-barred match, and Waller would make a mistake and taunting Johnny Gargano in front of his wife and their newborn child, which is terrible. That makes what Logan Paul did not as bad, even though Logan still sucks for that. But in any event, moving forward, this was a great no-holds-barred match, and eventually, after being caned by both Johnny Gargano and his wife, Johnny would get the victory and would stand in the entryway, reunited with both Indy Hartwell, Dexter Lumis, and the only person that was not there was Austin Theory. But most of the members of the Way would stand united as one, celebrating Gargano's victory. Next on this list, we have at number 4, Johnny Gargano with Tommaso Ciampa as DIY, not DUI. My bad. No, I don't drink. DIY versus Revival at NXT TakeOver Toronto 2016. This was a match where it was a 2 out of 3 falls match for the NXT Tag Team Championships, with the Revival being the champions, now known as FTR in AEW. Unfortunately for Gargano, but not too unfortunately, Gargano was first to be pinned. However, it was 2 out of 3 falls, which meant that they had more chances. Ciampa would get the next fall for DIY, and both Ciampa and Johnny Gargano would tap out both members of the Revival, with Johnny Gargano being the legal competitor. Next on this list, we have Johnny Gargano versus Ricochet at NXT TakeOver Phoenix 2019. 24 hours before he would make a special appearance at the Royal Rumble, Johnny Gargano would go on to face Ricochet for the NXT North American Championship. And this was a very important night for him because, with the exception of NXT TakeOver New Orleans, Johnny Gargano had not gotten a win at NXT TakeOver pay-per-views since going solo. He had lost to everyone from Andrade, even though it was an excellent match, as well as Aleister Black, among others, and even Tommaso. However, this was his redemption match. Even though he was heel at the time, it was his redemption match. And he did something pretty heelish, finally giving in to the urge to brain bust Ricochet on exposed concrete on the outside. And that special DDT move that he does, and he would win the NXT North American Championship and get a win, his second only win at the time at NXT as a solo guy. NXT takeovers, I might add. Next at number 2, we have Tommaso Ciampa versus Johnny Gargano in an empty arena match on an episode of NXT in 2020. As the pandemic was fresh and there were no live audiences, and the heat between Ciampa and Gargano building after Johnny Gargano cost Ciampa the championship at NXT TakeOver Portland, Triple H said, "You guys need to settle this," and they settled it in an empty arena. But we learned a very valuable lesson that year. Don't Waller is the only person that miraculously escaped from this. But anyone who knows Johnny Gargano's wife knows that two things. One, she has a right foot that can give you a vasectomy or birth control. Because during this match, Johnny and Candice made it seem like they weren't getting along. But Candice came in, kicked Johnny low, made Tommaso feel bad, and it was all a trap because then Ciampa got kicked low. And then it was set up for Johnny to finish him off and they would win the match. Listen, Candice LeRae is the ultimate vasectomy. The only other female vasectomies I can think of are Candice LeRae, China, the original vasectomy. China from WWF Attitude was the original vasectomy. Charmel and Ty Mello, Sammy Guevara's wife. Those are female vasectomies all day. Just being humorous with you guys. But nonetheless, thanks to Candice LeRae, Johnny settled that rivalry with Ciampa. And if you pay close attention, there is a moment that as Johnny and Candice are exiting, Karrion Kross, who made his appearance later on in the next week's episode, was spotted outside sitting in his black Camaro muscle car with Scarlett as Candice and Johnny take off. So if you ever happen to watch that match, pay very close attention to near end. You'll catch Karrion Kross in his car. Number 1, we have Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole at NXT TakeOver New York 2019. This would be a match for the vacated NXT Championship because Ciampa had broke his neck and had to have surgery and step out. So the two contenders left were Cole and Gargano, and this was the main event. And first of all, NXT 2019 was pretty good, but this match was the main event, and it was awesome, despite outside interferences from Undisputed Era. Because like this guy right here, Adam Cole during his reign as champion always had assistance, almost always. But in any event, this match, it was not enough to stop Johnny, as he would win by submission and become the first ever NXT Grand Slam champion, and would stand in the entryway reunited with Ciampa and his wife, Johnny's wife, Candice LeRae. Now let's move on to Kofi Kingston. At number 5, we have Kofi versus Sheamus at TLC. No, not TLC. At Extreme Rules 2010 in a tables match. The highlight of this, you don't have to say anything. Just put the highlight. And that was that extreme boom drop from the top rope onto the ground, putting Sheamus through the table, winning the U.S. Championship. At number 4, we have TLC 2018 with New Day Brethren Big E versus Lucha Dragons and the Usos before they lost the face paint. They were still face painting at the time. Now, this match, we saw the Kalisto use one of his finishers on one of the Uso twins, putting him through the ladder and one of the highlights of the match. And as it looked like the Lucha Dragons were about to get the championships and win the match, Xavier Woods would come in, throw a trumpet, which would give room for Kofi Kingston to go up the ladder and grab the titles, retaining their championship that they had won at SummerSlam 2015. At number 3, we have Kofi Kingston at the Survivor Series 2019. Fun fact, Christian was the only Canadian on an almost all black team of R-Truth, Mark Henry, MVP, and the sole survivor Kofi Kingston, who became the last person left on his team and would overcome the odds of CM Punk and Randy Orton, setting up for what would be a great rivalry with Randy Orton and some highlights from Madison Square Garden. 2 of them repeating themselves. Now, speaking of Randy, we go to number 2 with Randy Orton versus Kofi Kingston at Night of Champions, a rematch from SummerSlam 2019. This match was very epic. Kofi Kingston surviving an RKO. Not a lot of people do that. But this was a rematch because Randy Orton had taunt Kofi's family at SummerSlam, getting both men counted out and getting Randy Orton caned with a kendo stick. So in this rematch, it was very good. Like I said, Kofi surviving the RKO. Not a lot of people do that. But it only took one Trouble in Paradise to end the whole thing. But that brings me to number 1. And this was Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan, now known as Bryan Danielson in AEW. But this is Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania 35. This was so historic. 2019's WrestleMania was pretty historic. You had the first ever women's main event, but this was the first time that we had a championship, a main event championship match where Kofi Kingston would become the first African American to win a main event title at WrestleMania. Now, before Kofi Kingston, The Rock had main event at WrestleManias at WrestleMania 28 and 2000. However, he did not win a championship at WrestleMania, although he came as champion in 1999. Kofi Kingston will become the first African American to win one of the main event championships at a WrestleMania. And the push that Kofi Kingston received that year was awesome, and the fans were here for it. So, that being said, hopefully, I will say this before I go. Hopefully, someday before the rapture, Kofi Kingston, or before retirement, Kofi Kingston, who is the next best, who is CM Punk's favorite Kingston, by the way, hopefully he will win a Money in the Bank match before retirement. If he wins a Money in the Bank or a Royal Rumble before retiring, my bucket list will be complete. Nonetheless, let me know in the comment section below, what was your favorite match from Johnny Gargano and Kofi Kingston? Until next time, I'm your host, Daniel Cody, and that's all the time I have for you today. And I'll be back with another review on all things wrestling. See you next time.